We've been told that AI is coming for our jobs and that day may finally be here. We're also going to hear from a realty company CEO, and perhaps they can explain why Gen Z cannot afford houses. And then we're also going to introduce a new segment called Monday Movers. Stay tuned. This is The Will Whiten Show. So the first story, this is from CNBC related to AI. It says AI is driving huge productivity gains for large companies while small companies get left behind. Here's more. Large companies are seeing steady AI-related productivity gains since the release of OpenAI's ChatGPT model in 2022 in terms of their real revenue per worker, while small cap names are seeing a decline, according to Wells Fargo. So this is a report out of Wells Fargo that CNBC is reporting on, saying that there is a disparity in the returns that companies are seeing based on their size. Breakthrough advancements in AI this year have led major corporations such as Amazon to notably go all in on technology, finding ways to eliminate human roles that can be replaced by AI machines. So this is something that we've been told for a while. The AI optimists have been out there and saying it's going to automate everything. There's going to be mass layoffs. Some people take a more rosy approach and say, oh, well, it's going to give all this new leisure time and perhaps we'll have a 4-day work week and all this kind of all these rosy outlooks. And that's nothing new. Those are outlooks that have been around as soon as any new technology comes out, whether it be computers or even just larger storage methods, all of these things. Every time there's always a prediction, we're going to have a 3-day weekend and a 4-day work week, and everyone's going to live in this wonderful utopia. It never happens. Everyone just finds other ways to work and often work harder. The story goes on, the performance of the S&P 500 versus the Russell 2000 small cap index reflects this divergence in productivity gains. The broad market index, this is referring to the S&P 500, is up 74% since ChatGPT's launch in 2022, while the Russell is up only 39%. The biggest US companies have been internally deploying AI tools over the past few years to improve their productivity and supply chains, and in some cases cut headcount. So it's affecting all parts of the company, right? It's not just let's cut heads. It's finding different ways to be productive, applying to supply chains. It's mentioning different areas of the companies. And obviously large companies have massive budgets. And all of these companies that are creating all these different AI tools, well, they need to get a return on their investment. They're spending tens of billions of dollars, the companies that are running these AI chatbots and all these other AI tools, they're spending tens of billions of dollars to chase compute power, to build giant server farms, warehouses. Meta announced that they were going to try and build a warehouse that is almost the size of Manhattan, if you can believe that. I mean, massive. And then there's also tremendous investments being made on the power side, the energy side, in order to be able to fuel these power-hungry data centers that are being put together. There's a ton of investment. The large companies that are developing this technology need to get their money back. Well, how do they get their money back? Well, they have to start selling. They have to start selling all the advantages. And where are they going to go first? They're going to go to the companies with the deepest pockets that want to compete aggressively and are willing to pay for this. If you're a company like Microsoft and you need to get the return on your investment, are you going to hire a bunch of salespeople to then try and go out door to door to a bunch of small businesses with 5 to 10 employees? The return just isn't there. Obviously, they want to get those customers too, and there's ways of reaching them through advertising, but they really want to chase the big companies, and the big companies are willing to spend. In addition to that, the big companies also attract enormously competent talent. If you're graduating from a school, you often want to go to a name brand company. Even if you won't spend your entire career there, you'll know that you can stamp that name brand on your resume. It's like a seal of approval. I've been approved by Amazon. I've been approved by Starbucks. I've been approved by UPS. These are some of the companies in here that are also making these big changes. And so these big names attract a lot of talent. Well, what does that mean? When you have such competition to get into these companies, you can have your pick. You can grab the best and brightest. And when you put these tools in the hands of the best and brightest, they can do some pretty amazing things, and you can see some wonderful improvements. I know the idea that when AI was released, that it would just immediately give all the people that were kind of lagging behind or not able to compete, the idea that it would then make them compete at a level of a large company is misleading. They can compete at the level perhaps a larger company used to compete at, because we do not live in a bubble. This is not a vacuum. These tools aren't just released to smaller companies or medium-sized companies that might be able to take advantage of them. They're released to everyone. And so everyone can get the advantage. And so while it can make smaller companies better, assuming they adopt it, which this article is saying they may not be, they still won't be able to catch what the larger companies are doing. And that's if the adoption rate was equal. This article is saying the adoption rate must not be equal. The large companies are far surpassing that, and that's being credited to the stock price increases. Now, it has led to layoffs, and we've mentioned those over the last week. A new announcement today is, I don't know if it's fully confirmed, but there's suspicion that Amazon is planning to lay off 30,000 corporate workers. 30,000 due to efficiency gains. That is an incredible number. It makes you want to know all the details about all the areas that they've been able to apply this amazing technology. IBM gives some insight. There's a quote here. IBM CEO has forecasted 30% of non-customer facing roles will be cut by 2028, and told the Wall Street Journal earlier this year that AI chatbots have replaced 200 HR employees. This frees up investments to hire more people in sales and programming, right? So, hey, these tools are working great. Let's get more programmers to make sure we're using them to the fullest extent. Let's get more salespeople to sell whatever product it is that our company sells. Let's run a leaner, more efficient operation. This is the nature of business, regardless of AI or not. All of these companies are looking for efficiencies. And the reason they have to do it is because if they don't, their competitors will. It often feels like a zero-sum game. And if you don't make those improvements and your competitor does, then you may not be around tomorrow. And then 30,000 job cuts may look like nothing compared to the entire company going bankrupt and everyone being laid off. I believe Amazon employs, I think, at least 1 million, maybe it was almost 2 million people, and that involves additional hiring during the holiday seasons. But if the whole company goes down, it can be even more substantial. So that's the story on AI, where large companies seem to be adopting it. They have the talent to learn how to use it quickly and efficiently. And a lot of those brains go to those companies as opposed to smaller or medium-sized companies. So in addition to the people making the AI maybe not selling as aggressively to the smaller companies seem to be getting left behind for now. My opinion is that they'll catch up. I think they'll catch up eventually, but for right now, there's going to be a lag. And now for our new segment, Monday Movers. This is a new segment. Every Monday, I'm going to talk about industries or companies that I think are on their way up or perhaps are going to start to fall from grace a bit, and talk about what could be causing that. So today we're going to talk about the tech industry as a whole, and it's not necessarily for the reason you think so. So obviously we talked about AI and how that is propelling the tech industry from one end for those companies that are creating AI. It's also propelling other tech companies that are adopting AI. It's propelling tech companies that are creating the hardware that's necessary for AI. But the tech industry as a whole could see a bump this week. The FOMC most likely going to announce a quarter point rate cut. Now, when they do that, when they make a change in the interest rates that they are targeting, this affects everything. This can affect the interest rates that will show up when you try and get a car loan, when you try and get a mortgage. It's going to affect the interest rates that you could be charged on credit card debt. And it's going to affect the interest rates on companies when they go to borrow. So companies will issue debt to get more money in to fuel their aggressive growth plans. And there are few industries that are more aggressive and growth oriented, few industries like that other than the tech industry. That is something that they are known for, moving fast. And when interest rates come down, albeit just a quarter point, it does give that extra nudge of encouragement that they could get debt a little bit more cheaply to then finance their plans. Now, why would they do this? Why wouldn't they just stick with cash? I love the idea of sticking with cash, not being in debt, not being beholden to anyone on a personal level and even a company level. Think about the steadiness that you can feel if you were running a company and you weren't using any debt. Well, it turns out the market doesn't love this too much. And many CEOs are trained to actually operate with a less than AAA credit rating. So a AAA credit rating issued by one of the major credit rating bureaus like an S&P or a Moody's, that would mean that the balance sheet is incredibly rock solid. They're effectively a good bet and they will pay their debts. And this can be achieved when you don't have a lot or any debt. You can get a AAA rating if you have strong operations and you have a large cash stockpile. You can get that AAA rating. But what will happen is financial analysts, equity analysts, research analysts, when they're looking at companies that do that, they'll say, well, wait a minute. They're limiting themselves. They're limiting their source of capital because they're ruling out debt. And great, they have a AAA credit rating, good for them. But if you take two companies, and let's just make this up, and we can go outside the tech industry, but just say you have Pepsi and Coca-Cola, right? So I'm just trying to think of two examples, two competing companies that everyone's heard of. And say one company, Pepsi, takes the approach, no debt, absolutely not, we're not going to do it. And Coca-Cola says, we'll take on some debt, we will. We're fine with issuing some debt. Okay, well, let's assume, again, that both of these competitors have roughly the same sales and markets, and just think of them as almost indistinguishable except for the fact that Pepsi, no debt, Coca-Cola, sure, we'll take on debt. Well, what do you think is going to happen? As these two companies continue to compete, one company has a bit of an edge. They have more money now. They issued debt. So they got cash in and they can deploy that to try and grow more quickly. They can take that to modernize their operation so they can operate more efficient and effectively at a lower cost and therefore really accelerate their strength against Pepsi. They could hire more salespeople. They can try and move into Pepsi's territory and try and start selling Coca-Cola to increase sales because they have that extra money to pay those salespeople to try and be more aggressive. That gives Coca-Cola an edge. And Pepsi can, sit on their moral high horse and their no debt high horse and say, we're going to be okay. We think we're strong enough. But at the end of the day, Coca-Cola will have an extra advantage. Now, of course, Coca-Cola could misdeploy that capital. They could mess it up and they could waste the money. And then they'd end up being in a worse position than Pepsi and they'd fall by the wayside perhaps or start to lose sales or something, or if they have a failed efficiency improvement. Many projects fail at companies, many improvement projects, whether it's a technology or some physical improvement project. If they're improving a warehouse or something, projects fail all the time. And so that could be a waste of money. But the tech industry in particular, going back to the tech industry, seeing interest rates come down a bit, that could be a little bit more motivation to take on a bit more debt. Quarter point, not huge, but we've already seen interest rate reductions last month. So if we continue on this rate and even having a second reduction, it could signal to them, hey, we think it's time to ramp up a bit here and be a bit more aggressive, take on some more debt, and be a bit more ambitious. Because in the back of their mind, there's also the fear that if they don't, someone else might. And that someone else could then try and come and eat their lunch. So that's the Monday Movers segment. We're going to try and do that every Monday, where we'll do a deep dive on an industry or a company to see if they're about to blast off or maybe fall by the wayside. But one thing that we should all do is go ahead and blast the like button, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Please do all of this. It'll really help. It'll really help with the YouTube algorithm. I greatly appreciate it. Let's move on to our last story. And this one is from Fortune. It says, Cochrane Group CEO says Gen Z's housing market struggles mirror what boomers faced 30 years ago. And wait for it. Stop buying Starbucks coffee, she advises. Gen Z and young millennials face the prospect of renting with their parents for the foreseeable future, as getting onto the property market feels increasingly impossible. However, Cochrane Group CEO Pamela Liebman, who has weathered 40 years in real estate, says today's struggles are no more extraordinary than those faced by other generations. She has witnessed major crashes and numerous market shifts. So we didn't get into the exact comparison yet, but this is the CEO, a tenured CEO of one of the most well-known real estate companies in America. And she's saying every generation has its problems. Every generation has some sort of problem. And so having a problem, having some sort of barrier to success is not uncommon. And it's not something to be whined about. You have to control what you can control. She goes on, it's just as tough, Liebman exclusively tells Fortune. Back then, it was more difficult in some ways. She's doubling down. She's not only saying most generations have some sort of hurdle. She's saying in some cases it was worse back then. So you hear that. I hope you're listening, Gen Zs and young millennials. You should be grateful. You have it easier right now than some generations. Back then, it was more difficult in some ways because you had less neighborhoods for people to live in. That's an interesting point that people would live in. If you think back to the 80s, the meatpacking district wasn't this highly desirable district. Liebman explains, all these areas in Brooklyn that are number one on people's list, they weren't there. So you were sort of getting jammed into these few neighborhoods, Upper East Side, Upper West Side, maybe a little bit of Chelsea, Flatiron. I don't even think we called it Flatiron back then. So that's an interesting point. If you're trying to move into the city, into New York City, there are many, many more neighborhoods to pick from. It's not certain parts of Manhattan or bust. So she's saying there's more inventory. Obviously, there's more people now and maybe more people that desire to live in the city, but she's saying that there is inventory. There are more options, more rental and housing options, more rental and for sale options all throughout the city, not just Manhattan, in Brooklyn, and I'm sure other neighborhoods that she'll get into. So why are you whining, Gen Z? I feel like that's where she's going. Let's see what else she says. Let's see what the other problems are. She goes on, if you look at people who are taking an Uber, here we go, instead of the subway, they're buying their coffee, they're buying their breakfast out, they're spending money on things that are not necessary, they're going out with friends 3 nights a week, spending money on alcohol and food. These things definitely start to add up. The subway is definitely cheaper than an Uber. She's right. She's right. This is a factual statement. All of these things, there are all alternatives that are cheaper than some of these things. You can ride the subway instead of taking Uber. You can cook your own food, whether it be breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You don't have to go out to the bars 3 nights a week. Oh, but we're young, we're in the city, we want to enjoy it all. Is going out to the bar 3 nights a week as opposed to 1 night a week really going to make you enjoy your city experience that much more when you're in your early 20s? I don't think so. Some people may say yes. I don't think so. And the thing is, there seems to be this, victim or defeatist, maybe hopeless sort of attitude, maybe a defeatist and hopeless sort of attitude that I've heard from some of the Gen Zs. And it's that, well, we'll never be able to buy a house, and so why does it matter? We'll just spend. I think this has been called doom spending or something like that. We'll just spend. We'll never be able to afford a house, so forget it. We're going to enjoy. We're going to try and live as well as we can now because it doesn't matter. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think it's a defeatist attitude. And if we're talking about Gen Z, this is probably someone that's 25 years old. Why does a 25-year-old, most likely single, without a family, need a house? Why do they need to so aggressively get into the real estate market? This is not the 1950s. They don't have 2 kids already at age 25. I don't think a house is necessary. I would say to them, well, you have a good 10 years before you need to consider buying a house. So don't get down on yourself now. What are you going to do over the next 10 years? I know it's hard to think that way. I know it's hard to look out that far no matter what age you are. What are you going to do over the next 10 years to put yourself in a good position to buy a house where you want, in a reasonable place that fits your income? Personally, my wife and I didn't get a house until we were into our 30s. We delayed it. It wasn't necessary. And so many homes, we both worked in Manhattan for several years, it was unrealistic. I think back then, and this is probably going to sound cheap, a 1-bedroom was selling in downtown Manhattan for $1 million. That's probably very cheap now. For all I know, that's probably $1.5 or $2 million. I don't want to know what the price is. And there's a potential we could have stretched our money to really try and get that 600 square foot 1-bedroom condo for $1 million. We'd be living hand to mouth. That doesn't sound fun. Renting was cheaper. Saving and investing the rest was a better approach. We weren't so house hungry. In fact, we waited until after our first child was born to really seriously start looking at houses. We didn't need to run out and get a house immediately. I'm sure there's plenty of couples that as soon as they get married, we need a house, we need a house, we need a house. You can rent for a year. You can look at the different areas. You can make sure you're both firm in the jobs that you're planning to have, in the companies that you're planning to work with, in the areas that you're planning to live. Rent for a little bit. Get a feel for the area if it's new to you, or at least rent for a little bit to just make sure everything in your work life is going to feel a bit more settled, and then start looking for a house. We were in a 700 square foot apartment with a newborn. Some of you might think, oh, that's awful. Why would you put yourself through that? We felt it was a responsible thing to do. It doesn't seem responsible to spend all your money, doom spend, when you're 25 because I'll never be able to afford a house. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case. So obviously the market has its flaws at the moment. Things are obviously more expensive. The entire problem, and the CEO is not saying this, the entire problem is not just, oh, that Gen Z, they're just buying extra coffees and so it's all their fault. No, that's not the case. I'm sure there are people in every generation that spend way more than they should. We know that's a fact. I'm sure most people spend way more than they should. And so is that a problem in that generation too? Of course. And are there some structural problems with the real estate market preventing them to get a home? Of course. But also my opinion is don't get down on yourself, don't get down on the market. Think about when you would practically need a house and work toward it. Set a long-term goal, have some discipline, and work toward it. So that's our news stories for the day. Have a good night.